Hey everybody, it's Charlie from Daily Motor, and over the last several years, Chevrolet has taken different approaches to what should be the entry-level point for their electric vehicle lineup. At this point here in mid-2026, they offer a number of electrified vehicles, especially when you look all across the GM brand portfolio. And I actually really respect and appreciate General Motors' commitment to electric all the way back. I mean, technically you could go all the way back to the EV1 and electric Chevy S10 days, but really in earnest, starting with the Volt plug-in hybrid back in the early 20-teens, what was the first Volt? I think it was about 2011, I want to say. And then moving into the first generation Bolt in 2017. And now at this point, you got the Bolt, you've got the Equinox, you've got the Blazer, and you have the Silverado. And then again, not to mention all of the Cadillacs and the Hummers and the GMC and everything like that. But these are the two entry-level models now here in 2026. You had the Equinox serving the base point when they got rid of the Bolt, the second generation Bolt EUV and EV right there. And then, much to probably customer demand, they brought back the Bolt for technically the 2027 model year. So today I'm going to give you a little comparison between our personal 2025 Equinox EV and the new 2027 Bolt. And I should also mention that we owned a 2023 Bolt EUV. It actually looked exactly like our neighbors right there in that beautiful sky blue. And then we traded it in for the Equinox. So we do have a dedicated video comparing those two cars when we first got the Equinox. We've got plenty of reviews on both this decently loaded Equinox as well as a fully base model, $35,000 one. And then we've got plenty of videos on this Bolt and the previous generation as well. So check the link below for all of those. Also, quick side note, typically I like to shoot these comparisons in at the end of a street over there, but I didn't know that today was middle school graduation for the school that's right next to us. So we're shooting it right here in the cul-de-sac. You guys will get the same effect. So 2026, we've got two different approaches now from Chevy toward their electrified offerings. Now again, this is a fairly loaded Equinox EV. The packages are a little bit confusing, but this is an LT model. It was technically a 2LT with convenience packages. Actually, they didn't call it 2 or 3LT. It was an LT with the convenience package level 2 for 2025, which means we got pretty much everything outside of Super Cruise. So we've got the Evotech seats, we've got heated and ventilation, dual zone climate control, we've got the fun different colors on the inside, we've got the rear view camera mirror, sunroof, just about all that you're going to want and need out of an Equinox. This one's stickered at about $48,000, but we got it for much, much cheaper on lease for only, I think, about $3,200 for a 2-year lease. So it was kind of a no-brainer, and we've actually been really, really happy with it. I'm due to shoot an ownership update on this car and talk about what it's been like living with it for 9,000 miles and over a year. We do really like it. I still think it's one of the best new car values and just one of my favorite new cars on the market for average daily sort of use. We really like the amount of space inside of it. We've got myself and my wife Alyssa, it's her primary driver, and then we also have our 1-year-old baby. She fits in it nicely. You can see we've got the side of the door panel here quite dirty from lifting her Duna car seat in and out and rubbing it along, so hopefully that cleans up before we turn in the lease. But there's plenty of room back here for the rear-facing car seat with those seats plenty forward. We like that there's air vents back here for her. And in the trunk area, there's a good amount of space for full-size strollers and other accessories. If we're taking this to the beach or anything like that, there's a ton of room. And you can see the Equinox is about the same height as the Bolt, but it's so much wider and longer that it makes its space much differently. You'll see on the spec sheets that'll say, oh, well, if you put the seats down, they actually have about the same amount of cargo room. Okay, sure, maybe with the seats down, but with the seats up, if you're actually using it for more than 2 people, the Equinox has so much more space, and we've really, really appreciated that. So, honestly, very few complaints with the Equinox EV through most of our ownership. But then, for starting at about $28,000 here, the one you're seeing about 32 grand, the new Bolt. It is still based on the Bolt EUV platform. The smaller Bolt EV is completely gone now, but you do have this one. And we do have some meaningful upgrades for the 2027 model year. We have an entirely new battery and chemistry. This is an LFP battery versus the lithium ion in the Equinox, which means you can safely charge this up to 100% state of charge every day, and it's not going to put any extra wear and tear on the battery. Whereas with the lithium ion, as you fill it up above 80%, especially above 90%, all the way to 100, it strains the battery. It adds heat and wear and will degrade your battery over time if you're regularly charging to 100. So despite this having an EPA range of about 260 miles and that having an EPA range of about 320, in day-to-day use, if you're using them both regularly and charging this one up to 80 and this one up to 100, they're actually going to have pretty similar range figures. Speaking of range, we do have highway range tests on both of these cars up if you want to see how many miles you can get if you're just cruising steady state highway speeds. Fairly similar, but the Equinox definitely still has an edge. It's a little bit less efficient, but this one has a 65 kilowatt hour battery pack, whereas this one has, if I remember, it's about 82 kilowatt hours. I don't have the specs right here in front of me, but definitely a larger battery, and you do get more from those extra electrons in there. But getting back to the Bolt, we still have it in these fun colors. You can get the Equinox in some better colors as well, but Alyssa wanted something classy, so we got black, but I'm really digging this habanero orange. The wheelbase, you can see, is just so remarkable, actually, on both of these vehicles. This is a benefit of electric vehicles, is they can stick the wheels so close to the edges of the vehicles, and that allows for a little bit better ride, maybe a little bit less maneuverability, but also a great execution and optimization of cabin space. Now, I should say, Chevy went with a more bare bones economical perspective and strategy for the updated Bolt. So despite it being on the same platform and general same layout as the previous EUV, it's not as nice inside. You can't get a Bose sound system upgrade. The materials are of a lower quality, and you don't have things like power liftgate, which you didn't have on the last one either, but you do get on the Equinox. So you can see it's still a fairly decent amount of space right here. I mean, you can still put some things in. Do we have our large stroller? Let me see. This is an Up-A-Baby Vista, I think it's a Vista 2 stroller. And I know in the Equinox, you can get it in without taking anything off. You can just fold it up, slide it in the car. Can you do it in the Bolt? Absolutely not. You can see it's not wide enough. Let's see. Okay, now we've got the width figured out, but it's not deep enough. We'll put it up like that. Yeah, see? So, maybe if we take the actual stroller part off, which is fairly easy to do, then take this part, put it up like, See, if we had stuck with our Bolt, it would have been a little difficult to use a stroller. Might have just had to do one of these. Fold that seat down, keep Eve's seat on that side. Then, then we could have gone like this. Maybe? Oof. Yeah, it's gonna be tough. It's just a lot more of a limited space back here. It's more intended to be a vehicle that's kind of used by one or two people. The back seats are fine, which we'll see in a moment, but cargo, when you're using it with people, it's just a lot more limited. Whereas, I'll show you here in the Equinox, put this back together, go over to the Equinox, pop open the power liftgate, maybe. There we go. Now, you don't have a kick function underneath the Equinox. It's just frustrating to me. But look at this. Up-A-Baby stroller right in just like that. No adjustment to the seats. Still room to put other stuff. Still room to go up under here. And that closes just fine. So, the Equinox, definitely the better car if you've got a family or if you're planning on using it with that third row. That being said, we used the Bolt a lot when it was just Alyssa and I. Plenty fine for Costco trips or beach trips or anything like that. Let's give a quick shout out to the video sponsor, LasFit. We've got the LasFit liner in here, and you can already see just one time trying to load a stroller up in here, I've already got some dirt and debris, but with this LasFit cargo liner, pull it out, shake it off, put it right back in, and it's nice and clean. You can also see if we come up into the seating rows, the LasFit floor liner is doing a great job being nice and 3D measured, laser cut all the way around, fitting in tray style, going up under the seats so that if you got people riding back here, their feet aren't getting your carpet dirty, and they even come onto the plastic sills some, keep that from getting scratched up. That's very big. And then coming into the front, you can see how well they go up under the pedals, keeping those covered. If you live in an area with dirt, sleet, slush, snow, mud, all that sort of junk, Lasfit liners are going to do a great job. I wish they trade up a little bit more here on the sides in the Equinox, or rather in the Bolt. I could see this being a bit of an issue, but at least it does cover the side a little bit here, keep your plastics from getting dirtied, and then you can see they mount right into the factory mounts. So they're very affordable for the Bolt. Check the link below, get yourself even more off using the code DailyMotor for your Bolt or other vehicle. I think they've got them for the Equinox as well. So big shout out to Lasfit. You do have the underfloor storage as well in the Bolt. We always appreciated that. You can either drop this way down low and very much extend the space in here. And I bet you, come to think of it, if we had dropped this down, we probably would have been able to get the Up-A-Baby up and down in here, because it would have cleared that a little bit more. We probably would have gotten to make it work. It's just, you got to be a lot more creative with a small car like this. And some people, you know, some people are fine with that. They like being creative. And you do still have the factory flush mount roof rails, so you could throw a box on here, which would lower your range, but you would expand your usability when you need it with the Bolt. So again, fully loaded to fully loaded, you're looking about, I think if you got Super Cruise on here, you'd be looking almost $40,000. Whereas if you've got Super Cruise on that, you're about $50,000. And again, base price to base price, you're about $10,000 off as well. So a big chunk of that $10,000 is the size of the vehicle. Size of the vehicle and the battery pack and the horsepower, which we'll talk about a little bit when we're on the road. But taking a quick peek at the rear seat area, I've always been happy with how the Bolt EUV was packaged back here. Now, admittedly, I know my brother Nathan sat in the Bolt, and he didn't love how the roof came down and curved. If you're taller than I am at about 5'10", 32-inch inseam, your head is going to hit a little bit on the outside. But this isn't a bad place to spend, oh, maybe up to an hour or so. There's a decent recline. And these upper level models, you do get a little rear seat armrest with some grippy cup holders, 2 USB ports, but no air vents. So keep that in mind if you're trying to keep your rear seat passengers cool. And then back here, we're seeing some more of the cheapness. The hard plastics everywhere. It's all monotone. You do get auto down windows, but not auto up. But again, a lot of leg room, a lot of knee room. You could do a rear-facing car seat back here without much problem. Quick side note before we get into the back of the Equinox, this is something worth pointing out. The door handles. On the Equinox, they're the style that come out. They actually fold in when you're driving and then pop out electronically, and then you sort of pull them like this. Whereas on the Bolt, they're more conventional style handles that use a clicky button right here to lock and unlock, and then you put your hand through and pull. 2 reasons why I appreciate these. One, from a safety aspect. If your battery were to die, if you were in an accident or some other reason, those electronic handles couldn't pop open. On the Bolt, if someone were in the back, you could still get your hand in here and actually actuate that door handle and yank the door open. In the Equinox, if the battery's dead, those rear door handles are not going to open. And then secondly, we actually have a close friend who has a medical condition and her arms are weak. And they're in the market for another car. And they test drove our Equinox, and overall they liked it. But she actually had trouble with both the length and the design of these door handles, where because your hand sort of slips off and you have to grip harder, she had trouble opening the doors. And she said that would be a major issue for me if I were driving this car daily. So for her, the Bolt would make a lot more sense. But anyway, just something to consider for you. I'm trying to provide you those little kind of subtle details between the two. Let's hop in the back seat of the Equinox. Even with that seat all the way back here, I've got a more comfortable recline, more comfortable seat in general. Same flip down armrest with the grippy cup holders, but I've got 2 USB-C ports and heated seats, as well as air vents. So it's going to be a much nicer place back here. Headroom is better, the vehicle's wider, still got the handles. Now our old Bolt EUV had heated seats in the rear. The new Bolt does not. So again, we're seeing how for 2026-7 here, the Bolt is more of an economic car, basic car. The Equinox is where you're starting to get more of those features. And in the back, we're getting door panels with multiple colors. We're getting soft touch places for your elbows. Definitely just a better place to be. Coming into the front, we're seeing the same sort of theme. And the Bolt, much simpler colors. I remember our old Bolt had cool kind of dark blue seats. These ones, you do get the red cross stitching. I will point that out. For the seat adjustments in this RS model, you're getting, looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10-way adjustable driver power seat. So that means 2 different height adjustments. And then your recline 2-way lumbar. And of course, front and back. And then I do really like the layout of the 2027 Bolts. You can see how much more creative they got. You got this under area here. You've got a tiny little spot to put stuff. You've got 2 phone holders, one with a wireless device charger. And then I always really appreciate when brands put a little bit of storage up here. For a car that's not very large, you get a lot more optimization of space, and extra places to put things go a really long way. And then check out this little creativity. I don't know who came up with this, but kudos to them at Chevy, getting creative with the interior, because you can take both of these out, and then you have this giant open space. But what happened was yesterday, I had my big 32-ounce metal water bottle, so I took one of these, and I placed it just the right slot so that my metal water bottle fit snug in here and didn't rattle around. And of course, if you got a smaller water bottle, you can move these up, back, whatever. So I think it's nifty that they thought of something like this. Way to optimize the space. And you got the same one down here again for adjusting this size. Now, the center console is not super large, but it is decently deep. And then look at all these physical buttons. I love all these physical climate controls. We're going to see that more once we start the cars up, go for a little bit of a drive. But I really do think they did a great job designing the front of the Bolt. Hopping on over into the Equinox. Again, handles have to come out. And a little bit more fun with the colors. We do have actually the same amount of seat adjustment here. Neither of these seats are particularly comfortable, but the Bolts are narrower, and I'll have a little bit more of an aggressive bolstering on the bottom, which I don't care for. Equinox seats are not super thick, but they are decently comfortable. And then hopping on in, again, a pretty fun design for the interior. A little bit more driver-centric. I really appreciate the screen, if I pop the car on here, how large it is, how it's angled toward me, and how great it is to look at. It's just a very nice screen. That being said, the Bolt screen's a little bit faster, a little bit more responsive. We'll talk about that in a little bit here more. Close this so it stops beeping at us. Not quite as creative with the interior layout. You have more dead space. Very conventional cup holders, very conventional wireless device charger, a tiny little side slot here where I actually end up putting my phone most of the time when we're driving, because on the wireless device charger it just moves around and stops charging. A little bit of storage down here, which you can see we use for umbrellas, but you can use for a number of things. And then again, not a super huge center console. I mean, it works, it exists, it's functional. You got this 2-stage setup, but still not very large. Not as many physical controls for climate in the Equinox. I appreciate that we at least have some. I do often get in here and smash the on or off button depending on what I want as we get going. Volume knob closer to us, I do appreciate that, but in the Equinox, the screen is so far away that I do typically have to lean myself off of the seat in order to get to it. Another issue that some people have with the Equinox is windshield glare. Now, it looks like the sun's going to come out a little bit more as we're doing the driving portion of these reviews, so we might be able to witness that a little bit. We have the optional head-up display here in the Equinox EV. The windshield glare has never been a big issue for me or Alyssa. Some people might be a little bit more sensitive to it than others. So let's pull the Equinox over into a spot here, and we'll go out for a drive in the Bolt first. You do have walk-away lock and walk-up unlock with the Equinox EV. I do appreciate that. Bolt is just a little bit more basic. What do you guys think of that styling in the new Bolt? I like it overall. I didn't not like the styling in the old one, but I do think I like the new one just a little bit better. Another thing to point out between the two cars is the Bolt now comes with the North American Charging Standard plug, what a lot of people call the Tesla plug, which I understand in the long run is going to be the move, because more and more chargers are moving to this adapter. However, ironically, it's actually a little bit less convenient with the Bolt, and here's why. The Bolt is not a road trip car. Yes, it can now charge it up to 150 kilowatts. Yes, it's got a longer range, and yes, it comes with optional Super Cruise. But just based on the size of the car and the range, the size of the battery and everything, it's not designed to go on big trips like as if this were something like an Escalade, or even the Equinox, or something like the Blazer or the Lyric, something like that. This is more of a city type car, which means you're more likely to be charging on level 2. In fact, when we owned our Bolt for about a year and a half, we only fast charged once, and then I think we've only fast charged our Equinox once. So we almost always just use level 2. And most level 2 chargers here in North America use the CCS standard, actually it's the SAE, the J plug, whatever, J1772 or something. So you're gonna need an adapter pretty much all the time here for this car. Now obviously Teslas have been using the adapter for a long time, so it's not that big of a deal. It's just kind of funny that you would think moving over to the North American charge standard is more convenient, but in some ways it's actually been less convenient. With the new Bolt, you simply put your foot on the brake and the vehicle comes to life, and look how quickly that screen comes on. That's the case every time I've gotten in this car. It just pops on and is ready to use. I've been super happy with how responsive and quick the system is in the Bolt. Pros and cons with the screen layout itself. I like how it's built into the dash. I like the overall size and functionality. However, I will point out the angle is not nearly as convenient and as nice to look at as it is in the Bolt. The screen's smaller, it's harder to see, but it is closer. So pros and cons there. Power adjust steering column, single zone climate control, but you saw right when I got in, my ventilated seat came out automatically. I spammed this button twice, bada bing, bada boom, it's off. Column shifter, I love that they got that now, frees up the center area. Auto up windows just on the left side. And I have been so impressed by the quietness of the new Bolt. Even on concrete sections of highway, this is a very nice car to be in from a noise perspective. Let's get our air conditioning going. That's another thing I appreciate is Chevy is still giving us the AC and heat buttons for our climate control, which means that if you want to drive around and not be using your compressor, just blowing in fresh ambient air into your cabin, you can still do that with these cars. I like that. Smaller steering wheel with the Bolt. It's a little bit narrower. The buttons are a little bit differently laid out. It's a bit thinner as well. And it goes to the whole ethos of how this car drives compared to the Equinox. When we traded in our Bolt EV for the Equinox, Alyssa pointed out that the Bolt feels more like a go-kart and the Equinox feels more like a spaceship. And I fully agreed. That car is floaty, it's calm, especially in just the front wheel drive model. The Bolt feels snappier and quicker and a little bit more playful. Now, the 2027 Bolt is less powerful than the previous Bolt EUV. The torque figure is much lower from the electric motor. However, they did change the final drive ratio, so it's still snappy. It still has something like a mid-6s 0 to 60, but it still doesn't feel like the previous Bolt that had something like 260 pound-feet of torque and would just rocket you off the line. You used to be able to light up the tires in the old Bolt if you turned stability control off and matted the accelerator. That's not the case with this car anymore. However, it still has the small car feel compared to the Equinox. General comfort feels more economical. Again, I keep going back to that ethos. This center console is a little far back, it's a little bit firm, so my elbow not particularly comfortable when I'm driving with my right hand resting like this. Let's wake it up a little bit here. Full acceleration, getting up to about 170 kilowatts at max. Still very peppy, very zippy. And interestingly, that power doesn't come on full from a stop, but it does build when you're up here at these higher speeds. It comes on full. It's still a pretty quick car. I mean, it's definitely not Tesla Model 3 levels or anything like that, but you're not going to be disappointed with the power levels here in the Bolt. And getting a little bit of a rattle somewhere up in front, but overall, like I said, quiet car in here. It's nice having the Google Maps going right here in front of us. However, I am disappointed that we don't have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto support. 3 different levels of one-pedal driving. You can have no one-pedal regen, normal, or high. However, for the Bolt, they have eliminated the little paddle on the back left of the steering wheel. For those of you who are unfamiliar with what that does, if you were on low or no regen, you could use that paddle in order to blast up to full regen. So if you were coming up to a stop, you were cooking it a little bit too hard, you could pull that paddle and it would increase the regen. You'll see it here when we drive in the Equinox. They decided to remove that with the new Bolt. I can't fully blame them. I understand that that was a little bit more of an EV nerd kind of feature. However, those of us who've had it in our electric GM vehicles have probably appreciated using it. Maybe a minority, but still a significant minority. And what's interesting is in vehicles like the Silverado EV, you actually have a progressive paddle. I think it's even in the Escalade, where you can sort of pull it harder to get more regen. And that's just, I've always appreciated that functionality, so it's a little disappointing to have it gone in the Bolt. Also, and I could be mistaken on this, but it doesn't seem that there is a way to customize our gauge cluster layout here in the Bolt. In the Equinox, we'll see we got a button on here. You can change what you see in your screen. Maybe there's a way to do it. I'll play with it when we're at the next stop sign or stop light. But it seems like we have a little bit more of a fixed screen layout. Visibility is okay. Our C-pillars are pretty massive back there, so you're definitely going to want to utilize the blind spot monitoring. No sort of special blind spot camera or anything, but we do still have a 360 cam on this fully loaded Tech Package RS. GM has really dialed in their one-pedal driving. I drive both of these cars around in normal one-pedal, and it's just strong enough that you can comfortably come to a stop when you're cruising along in normal driving, but it's not yanking you back. It's a very nice curve. That's where that sort of expertise and experience with electric vehicles is coming into play here for the GM cars. I'm gonna get it up onto the highway now. Looking around the cabin, we do have more hard plastics and more simple, kind of dark monochrome plastics here in the Bolt. I'm not one who cares too much about that. For me, this is supposed to be just a car that gets you up at point A and point B and doesn't cost you that much, and I'd rather pay less and not have a bunch of soft touch materials where I'm not even going to touch them anyway. But if you're somebody coming out of a second gen Bolt, considering, okay, do I step up to the Equinox or do I stay in the Bolt platform, it's just something to consider that this is a little bit more of a plastic fantastic type of car, keeping it at that lower price point as opposed to the Equinox. And that even goes to the base Equinox EV. I know ours that we're going to be in here in a moment is a more upper level model, but I did that comparison with a very, very basic Equinox, and that one still has nicer materials inside of it here than this fully loaded Bolt. However, you do at least get the leather wrapped steering wheel in the Bolt RS, whereas in the base Equinox, it is rubber. This is a very subtle observation, but the turn signal is louder in the Bolt than it is in the Equinox. I've always appreciated our very subtle, calm clicker in the Equinox. The Bolt is a more carefree car to drive around the city. If you're somebody who drives in more urban areas, kind of tight, that sort of deal, you're going to appreciate the size and the zippiness of the Bolt. And that is something that Alyssa commented on after driving the Equinox for a while. She said, yeah, it's just, it's a calmer car. She said, I drive slower, I drive more relaxed, I feel more relaxed in the Equinox, but sometimes she misses the peppiness of her Bolt. Here's a full 0 to 60. Again, you really don't get that maximum power until it starts getting up to speed. Sound systems, they're both pretty atrocious, both a fairly similar 6-speaker system. The Bolt seems worse, but that could just be an internal bias of mine. It's not exactly scientific. Either system could vastly benefit from some better speakers. Fortunately, the Equinox EV for 2027 is getting an optional Bose system. You do really have to pony up for it, but if you want a fully loaded Equinox EV, you can get the Bose now. For the Bolts, that's no longer an option. You're getting this system or buy something else. In terms of energy efficiency, the Equinox EV is going to be a little bit less efficient than the Bolt. I kind of considered that when we went from the Bolt to the Equinox, but generally, if you're charging off-peak hours, level 2, the cost difference is going to be so minor that, yes, is it technically going to save you a little bit of money to have the Bolt? Yes. but the purchase cost is going to be so much more dramatic than the energy efficiency costs. I mean, sure, maybe if you were doing 100, 200 miles a day, it's going to add up, but it's what, about 10% difference. So maybe you're spending $40 a month as opposed to $50 a month, or if you're somewhere with really cheap electricity, it's going to be much less than that. So yes, it is a factor, but to me, it's a very small factor. Here we are up 70 miles per hour on a concrete section of highway. Take a listen in the Bolt. Again, for a car that's going to have an average price of around $30,000, I'm very happy with this. I mean, we drive fully loaded Honda CR-Vs that are significantly louder on the highway. So, yeah, I was very impressed and satisfied with road noise here in the Bolt. The wireless device charger, slightly better execution in the Bolt. However, it's a little bit of a tight spot there as well. So I bet you, if you had one of the big phones, like an iPhone Max or something, and a case on there, you might actually have trouble fitting it in. Another aspect to consider for long-term costs are the tires. Tires are smaller and bound to be less expensive here on the Bolt than on the Equinox, especially the higher trim Equinoxes that have the stupid big wheels like ours does. So yeah, I mean, in general, the Bolt is just going to be a more affordable car to purchase, affordable car to own. And the functionality in here, still not bad. I mean, you've got, in this fully loaded RS model, you've got the rear view mirror, you have the 360 camera, you've got ventilated seats. Not a good sound system, but optional Super Cruise. So most of the things that I would want out of a nicely loaded mainstream vehicle, you do get here in the Bolt at a very, very reasonable cost. So let's get this back, let's hop in the Equinox, and let's talk about what you get when you're spending about $10,000 to $15,000 more across the board. All right, Equinox time. Again, you can see those huge wheels, and because the Equinox is so heavy, they're actually 6-lug wheels, because these GM EVs, big boys. Oh. Same sort of design where you just put your foot on the brake and the vehicle comes to life. Bigger steering wheel with a little bit more robust button layout, and it's just thicker in general, and I'm not a big fan of a thick steering wheel. I prefer the very thin one in the Bolt. I mean, this is fine, but just again, a little personal preference thing. But again, love being able to throw the climate control on, but don't love how few more controls are baked into the screen. I would prefer to just have those buttons like the Bolt does. Overall, I think, and I'm gonna hopefully not rustle too many feathers here, but in general, the more budget cars from General Motors are often the ones that are better laid out. I think they're just a little bit more out of the box thinking. Maybe it's a younger product planner or something like that. They're really thinking, okay, what do people really want in these cars, as opposed to the more expensive cars seem to be designed a little bit more like, well, we'll make it look nice and kind of have a nicer feel to it. So again, just two different perspectives. However, the design of the center console, the armrest here comes so much further forward that it's much more comfortable to be able to rest your elbow and then hold the steering wheel. Small asterisk though, it does have this line of stitching that's in a very bad spot because that is typically right where the bone of your elbow rests. So I wish they hadn't designed it that way, but the general build of this being further forward does make for more comfort. And then same thing with the door. It's just a little bit softer and squishier for the elbows, a little bit further forward, generally more comfortable. One of the buttons on the steering wheel does customize our gauge cluster screen. So you can see here, you can get up the full satellite map set up like this, or at least GPS. You can bring up different energy screens. Just a little bit more customization and functionality there. The overall interior fit and finish is a big level above. And again, even in the base model, the base 1LT that we drove earlier last year of the Equinox, everything is fit together nice and tightly. You've got a lot more soft materials around. Generally, despite not being as efficiently laid out inside, it is a nicer build in this car. It's definitely a class up. I'll be curious if one of our subscribers, Daniel, ends up tuning into this video. And Dan, if you watch, comment below, let me know but he owned a number of Bolts, and he actually sold us a set of speakers for a Bolt, and then he purchased the Equinox EV, didn't like it, and I think he got another Bolt. So I'm curious what his thoughts are on the 2027, if he's driven it yet, and if he'd go up to that new one, because I think that one's going to make him quite a bit happier. But here on this twistier section of road, I think we've got maybe even the same motor in the Equinox as we do in the Bolt, because full accelerator, we're getting a slight bit more power, about 174 kilowatts max I saw there, but still not a rocket ship, but enough power to even up this decently steep hill, accelerating no difficulty. Now if you get the all-wheel drive Equinox EV, it's going to be quite a bit more powerful. The power in the Equinox, though, it is a little bit more. It's got more weight to move, but it comes on more immediately as well. And I don't know if that's an aspect of the battery chemistry or just the quality of motor or what, but you get a little more power and you get it more broadly and earlier in your speed range. So it's, despite not being as peppy of a car, it does pull. And if you get the all-wheel drive model, then it's really going to pull. Same thing with Regen, though, come together and down nice from those higher speeds. And in the Equinox, you get the little paddle. I'll show it to you here in action at a different section of the drive, but you pull that and then you get full Regen right away. I really like that functionality. In general, though, the Equinox is a more relaxed driving experience. It's very quiet in here. The suspension is softly damped, so it kind of floats along a little bit more. You do get maybe slightly more primary road imperfections, a little bit of those bumps and jumps from little cracks in the road just because of these big wheels and thin tires, but all things considered, it's a more comfortable ride in here. Seats have a little bit more squish, they're wider, very, very classic General Motors inside this Equinox EV. Some annoyances with both cars: fewer physical controls for the headlights. Kind of annoying, you got to go into the center screen in order to change headlights. I think both of them even to turn all the dome lights on. It's this change that General Motors has been making in a lot of their vehicles. I get it, and admittedly, even after owning this car for a year, we always just have the headlights on auto, so it's not the biggest deal. That being said, the infotainment is just not as straightforward and easy to use as something like the Tesla screen. So you find yourself hunting around for a lot of those functionalities, especially when they're functions that you don't use very often. So, okay, all of a sudden I want to turn my dome lights on. I'm like, crap, how do I? Okay, I go into controls and everything, take my hands off the wheel and stuff. Instead of most cars where you just go click and all your dome lights are on. I wonder if you can do it with voice, though. Hey Google, turn my dome lights on.
Sorry, I don't understand.
No. And while I do love the Android Automotive-based Google systems in these cars, again, not having Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, big frustration to me, especially when Chevy does offer it with this exact same system on their gasoline cars, but on their EVs, they eliminate that. They want you to pay extra once their the OnStar system here runs out. They want you to pay monthly for the data subscription to use all their functionality. Now, the one thing they'll say is, oh, well, we think the system works better without Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, so you use the built-in Google navigation with the EV routing and everything. I understand that, but don't limit us. Come on, don't treat your customers like idiots. They should be able to use their phone's built-in functionality when they want to use it, and then use the car's built-in functionality when they want to use that. If you're not smart enough to know how to switch between the better mapping functions in your electric vehicle, you probably shouldn't own an electric vehicle to begin with. In fact, the one time that Alyssa needed to use level 3 charging so far with her Equinox, you know what she did? She picked up her phone, she opened the EVgo app, which, okay, fine, I wish she would have used PlugShare, but what she knew was to use EVgo, and she looked for the nearest charger and she went to it and charged up. She did not use the car's system, even though the car probably would have given her better chargers. She wants to use her phone. People want to use their phones. And again, you go back to a brand like Tesla, they've never had Apple CarPlay and Android Auto to begin with, so it's a little bit more forgivable that they don't have it into their cars now. And I do know Tesla is working on having CarPlay built in there. However, GM does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto for their cars with this exact system. They've just taken that functionality out for the EVs, and that is what's so rude to me. You do have a nice head-up display here in the Equinox. I like having it on. Right now we have it set to just show us our digital speed, the speed limit, and our cruise control information. It's nice to just have that beamed up there. Do a little 0 to 60 takeoff here now in the Equinox. A little more torque steer, definitely a little more power pulling the car forward. It's got to move more weight, so 0 to 60 times are probably similar, if not actually a little bit slower here with the Equinox. But very strong, confident power. And again, great regen as well, coming back down to speed. The turning radius in the Equinox EV, not fantastic. It's better in the Bolt. It's not remarkable, but again, that more kind of tight city-style maneuverability, the Bolt really wins out. It's even got lighter steering in the Bolt, so just a more generally pleasant experience for that zippy type of driving. Here's that same section of concrete highway in the Equinox EV. Comparable, I'd say maybe even slightly quieter than the Bolt. These GM EVs are just very quiet. Yeah, that's just single pane glass in both cars, but they're quiet. And I don't know if it's a tire technology or sound insulation or just decent build or what, but they're nice cars to be in on the highway. Visibility also not fantastic in the Equinox. It does have a little bit more of this kind of squished, elongated feel. C-pillars are still trash. Yeah, but from a technology standpoint, you actually have pretty similar accommodations here. It doesn't feel like you're missing out when you go and get in the Bolt. In fact, I don't know, is there anything that this car has that the Bolt doesn't from a tech standpoint? I mean, the configurable gauge cluster, the screen's obviously larger. I don't think so, though. I mean, I for the price, you're getting a lot more bang for your buck from a tech standpoint in the Bolt than you are in the Equinox. Let me show you that paddle here in action. So we pull it, and then it just boosts up the regen a little bit. However, I do think our battery's a little bit too full to be getting maybe the full max regen on this car, but it is nice to have. I like having that little paddle there. All right, both back here, you can see a little bit of the size comparison with the Equinox and the Bolt. Equinox pulled a little bit forward here, sticking out in the front, and then walking to the back, sticking out in the back too. So just a longer car in general. Height though, fairly similar. The Equinox is a pretty low slung vehicle, but the width is also a huge thing to consider. If you're parking in tighter driveways, the Bolt is just a lot easier to do. The Equinox, it's not a small car, it's not a large car, but it's much more comfortably in the middle there. So that's the easiest answer between these two, is just, does your lifestyle support the Bolt? And if it doesn't, you kind of got to go with the Equinox. At this point here in our lives, could we make things work if we had held on to Alyssa's Bolt with the one child? Absolutely. I mean, people make things work. But if given the choice between the two, I already know Alyssa has said flat out, we got to have the Equinox. She doesn't want to be making those compromises for the size in the Bolt. So generally, if you're driving with mostly just yourself, maybe one other adult, the Bolt, better way to go. I prefer driving the Bolt as just myself. It's more economical, it costs a lot less, and you're really not missing out on that much other than a little bit of comfort and, I mean, now an optional Bose sound system, which, as we've seen with our last Bolt, it's pretty easy to upgrade the speakers in this one. So yeah, I guess the biggest thing to me from a non-driving perspective, I just prefer the screen size in the Equinox, but it's by no means a deal breaker with the Bolt. However, if you have a third person, whether that be a child, other adult that you're driving around regularly, or you just need to put things in the car with a third person regularly, I mean the Equinox. You got to go with the Equinox. And also road tripping. You can realistically get about 160 to 180 miles or so at 70 miles per hour in the Bolt, charging from 10% up to 90% level 3 charging speeds, whereas the Equinox, you're going to be able to stretch it just that little bit further, an extra half hour or so. It's going to space out your trips a lot more comfortably. It's going to be a better car for road tripping. Do I like the fact that you have to spend so much more to get to the Equinox? No. I think the Bolt is a fantastic value at under $30,000, depending on how you build it out. I think the Equinox is a good value. However, if I were getting a fully spec'd Equinox EV and I weren't taking advantage of a lot of the General Motors incentives, I would have to seriously consider things like the Tesla Model Y, the Hyundai Ioniq 5, the Kia EV6. There's so many other options in this class. Whereas the Bolt, you pretty much just have the Leaf. I mean, technically in this size category now you have the Subaru Uncharted and the Toyota CHR. Those look good. I'm definitely gonna have to drive them. I bet you could get out the door a lot less expensive with a Bolt EUV than those other cars. Maybe the Leaf you could get comparable. I will be driving all of them at some point. But again, if we're just talking about the bow ties, if you can fit, if your lifestyle supports the Bolt, I would highly recommend it from a new car MSRP perspective. The Equinox is a nicer car. It's more comfortable, it's calmer, but yeah, it just supports a larger lifestyle. So thank you all so much for watching. If you do want to see more on either of these cars, we got plenty of videos covering both of them. Big shout out to LastFit for throwing some liners in the car, throwing some cash our way. Throw some cash their way if you want to get yourself some good floor liners. And we'll see you on the next one. I'm Charlie from Daily Motor, and as always, drive on.